or is this a machine? Well, good, because this is a person talking.
Think back to Friday nights in the 1970s. Families gathered around the television, and at 8 o'clock sharp, that unforgettable harmonica melody filled living rooms across America. For 6 seasons, Fred Sanford and his son Lamont turned a junkyard in Watts into comedy gold. But behind the laughs and the fake heart attacks were stories most viewers never knew. These are 10 hidden facts you didn't know about Sanford and Son. Fact 10. Red Fox's real name inspired the show's title. John Elroy Sanford was born in St. Louis, Missouri on December 9, 1922. Most people knew him as Red Fox, but that stage name came much later. His father, Fred Sanford Sr., was an electrician who left the family when John was only 4 years old. His mother, Mary, moved to Chicago to find work, leaving young John and his brother with their grandmother in St. Louis before eventually bringing them to Chicago's South Side. Growing up, John had a ruddy complexion, which earned him the nickname Red. He later added the extra D and took Fox from baseball player Jimmy Fox, creating the stage name that would make him famous. When Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin were developing the American version of the British sitcom Steptoe and Son, Fox insisted on naming his character after his family. Fred Sanford was actually the name of Red's older brother, Fred Sanford Jr., who had passed away in 1963 at the age of 46. The character's middle initial G stood for nothing in particular, but using the Sanford surname honored Fox's real family name. Even Lamont wasn't a random choice. That name belonged to Lamont Ousley, one of Fox's childhood friends in Chicago. The three of them had formed a band called the Four Bon Bons back in high school. Ousley became a theater manager who had helped Fox during the Depression when the young comedian was struggling to make ends meet. The show became a family tribute hidden in plain sight, with every name carrying personal meaning for its star.
Yeah, I'm 65 years old today. Yeah.
Fact 9. LaWanda Page and Red Fox were childhood friends. When Aunt Esther stormed onto the screen calling Fred Sanford a fish-eyed fool, audiences had no idea they were watching a friendship that dated back decades. LaWanda Page and Red Fox first met at Banneker Elementary School in St. Louis when they were children. Page was 2 years older than Fox, but they both grew up in the same neighborhood and both eventually entered the world of comedy. Page's journey to television was anything but conventional. She began her career at age 15 in St. Louis, learning to fire dance. Billed as the Bronze Goddess of Fire, or LaWanda, the Flame Goddess, she performed dangerous acts that included swallowing fire, lighting matches and cigarettes with her fingertips, and walking barefoot over flames. She burned herself frequently in those early days, though never seriously. As she once said, "If I had to burn to make a living, I was willing to burn." Later, she moved to Los Angeles and transitioned into nightclub comedy, becoming known for material that was just as raunchy as Fox's infamous party records. Before Sanford and Son, Page had recorded several explicit comedy albums for Laugh Records, the same label that featured Fox's adult-oriented routines. In fact, by the early 1970s, Page had left show business entirely and moved back home. Then in 1972, she got a phone call that changed everything. Fox had landed the starring role in a new sitcom and wanted her to play Aunt Esther. When the show began, producers wanted to fire Page after a few rehearsals. They felt she lacked television experience and couldn't adapt to the sitcom format after years of performing in nightclubs. Fox refused. He told producers that Page was his first and only choice for Aunt Esther, and he threatened to walk off the show if they let her go. The producers backed down. Page proved them all wrong, creating one of the most memorable characters in television history. The contrast between her devoutly religious, Bible-quoting Aunt Esther and her real-life comedy act was remarkable. Behind the scenes, Page could curse with the best of them, but on camera, she delivered "Oh, glory" with perfect conviction.
Your dad look queer, do you? No, I like it more like this. That's the way.
Fact 8. Quincy Jones wrote the theme song in 20 minutes. That infectious harmonica melody that introduced every episode had a remarkably quick birth. Producer Bud Yorkin approached Quincy Jones around 1970 to compose the theme for the new show. At first, Jones was genuinely skeptical about the whole project. He had known Red Fox for years through the entertainment circuit and was very familiar with his extremely explicit comedy act. Fox's party records were legendary in the black community, but far too raunchy for mainstream radio. Jones found it hard to believe that Fox, whose albums were sold under the counter in many stores, would star in a primetime family sitcom on NBC. Once Jones understood the show's concept, and Yorkin convinced him it could work, everything changed. Jones sat down and drew on his deep familiarity with Fox's personality and comedic style. The entire theme, which he titled The Street Beater, came together in roughly 20 minutes of composition. The recording session with the musicians took about the same amount of time. Jones later recalled in a 2010 interview, "We had 4 musicians, recorded it in about 20 minutes. It's amazing. Looking back, it's a trip." The main melody featured harmonica player Tommy Morgan, whose soulful performance became the song's signature sound. The tune had a funky, street corner quality that perfectly captured the world of Fred and Lamont's junkyard. Jones released The Street Beater on his 1973 album You've Got It Bad Girl, and it also appeared as a single from that album. Though it never became a Billboard chart hit, the theme became one of the most recognizable television songs of the decade, earning a permanent place on Jones's greatest hits collections. The song has since been referenced and sampled in numerous other shows and songs. In 2010, Jones even created an updated version featuring rappers T.I. and B.O.B., introducing the classic theme to a new generation. The speed at which Jones created such an enduring piece of music speaks to his genius and his understanding of what the show needed.
Like the card better. All right, keep the card and I'll take the hat back. No, you give me the hat and you take the card. You don't believe it? I bought it, didn't I?
Fact 7. The truck is still around today. The faded red 1951 Ford F1 pickup truck wasn't just a prop or a rental. It became as much a character on the show as Fred and Lamont themselves. Every week, viewers saw that beat-up old truck in the opening credits, with Lamont driving up to the house after presumably making a delivery or picking up junk. The truck represented everything about the Sanford business. It was worn, functional, and somehow still running despite its age. The specific truck used in filming was a base model 1951 Ford F1 with a 6-cylinder engine and a 3-speed manual transmission. It had that distinctive faded red paint that looked like it had been sitting in the sun for decades. The truck appeared in countless episodes throughout the series' run, and both Fred and Lamont were shown driving it at various times. Occasionally, Lamont's friends Rollo and Julio would get behind the wheel too. After the show ended its original run in 1977, that exact truck was purchased at auction. NBC then leased it back for the spin-off shows Sanford Arms and Sanford, wanting to maintain continuity with the original series. Over the years, the truck changed hands several times, becoming a sought-after piece of television history. At one point, it was owned by Donald Dimmitt, who ran Dimmitt's Auto Salvage in Argos, Indiana. The irony of a real junk dealer owning the Sanford and Son truck wasn't lost on fans or on Dimmitt himself. In 2014, the truck was sold at auction for $13,500, which might seem modest given its television fame, but collectors understood its value. Tim Franco and Jeff Cantor, who owned Blue Line Classics, a classic car dealership in North Royalton, Ohio, purchased the truck. They undertook a careful restoration to bring it back to its appearance from the show. They matched the faded red paint, added the Sanford and Son lettering on the doors, and made sure every detail was authentic to how it looked on television. The truck is now displayed in the Blue Line Classics showroom in North Royalton, where it's become a tourist attraction. Fans of the show make pilgrimages to see it and take photos next to this piece of television history. The truck has also been loaned out for special events, car shows, and television retrospectives. It's been featured in several locations within the Cleveland area over the years. For people who grew up watching Fred and Lamont load junk into that truck bed, seeing it in person brings back a flood of memories of Friday nights in the 1970s.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
What'll it be?
What are you gonna have to drink, Dad?
Fact 6. The show was based on a British sitcom. American audiences might have thought Sanford and Son was purely homegrown comedy, but the concept traveled across the Atlantic Ocean. The show was adapted from the BBC sitcom Steptoe and Son, which aired in the United Kingdom from 1962 to 1974. The British version featured Harold and Albert Steptoe, a father and son who ran a rag and bone business in the working-class oil drum lane in London. The British show dealt with the class system, social aspirations, and the generational divide in post-war England. Norman Lear saw the tremendous potential to adapt it for American audiences, much like he had successfully done with Till Death Us Do Part, which became the groundbreaking All in the Family. Lear understood that the core conflict between an aging parent stuck in their ways and an adult child dreaming of escape was universal. This wasn't even the first attempt at bringing Steptoe and Son to America. Producer Joseph E. Levine had tried to create an American version back in 1965, starring Lee Tracy as the father and Aldo Ray as the son. That pilot was filmed but never aired, and it didn't lead to a series. The project died quietly, and the unscreened pilot wasn't even released on DVD in the United States until years later. Lear's version succeeded where others failed because he didn't just copy the British show, he adapted it for the American experience, setting it in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles and making the Sanford family African American. This gave the show its own identity and cultural relevance. The junkyard became more than just a business. It represented both the limitations of poverty and the entrepreneurial spirit of survival. Fred Sanford wasn't just a grumpy old man. He was a black man who had built something of his own in a society that often denied such opportunities. Lamont wasn't just an ungrateful son. He represented the aspirations of a new generation that had grown up with different possibilities. The universal tension between parent and child took on added dimensions when filtered through the African American experience of the early 1970s.
The muscatel for $3. Would you just pipe down and...
Fact 5. Red Fox walked off the show over money. During the third season in 1974, viewers noticed something very strange happening on their television screens. Fred Sanford, the show's star and title character, disappeared from Sanford and Son for 6 episodes near the end of the season. The explanation given on screen was that Fred had traveled to St. Louis to attend a cousin's funeral, and his friend Grady Wilson, played by Whitman Mayo, was left in charge of the house and the junk business. Lamont suddenly had to deal with Grady's well-meaning but bumbling attempts to run things. The real story behind Fred's absence involved money, power, and respect. Fox had been earning $19,000 per episode, which sounds like a fortune, and would be equivalent to about $134,000 in today's money. But Fox felt he deserved more. This was his show. His name was in the title. His character drove every storyline. His comedy timing and his improvisations in front of the live studio audience made the show special. He demanded a 25% ownership stake in the series, along with a substantial salary increase. He felt he deserved a piece of the show he had built. Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin, the producers, refused the demands. NBC, which was making millions from the show's success and its high advertising rates, wouldn't budge either. So, Fox walked. He cited health issues publicly, but everyone in Hollywood knew it was about the contract. NBC responded by suing Fox for $10 million, claiming he had breached his contract and damaged their programming. The lawsuit made headlines and created enormous tension. Behind the scenes, negotiations continued. The show's ratings remained strong even without Fox, which actually hurt his negotiating position. Whitman Mayo's Grady proved popular enough to carry episodes, showing that the ensemble cast had developed their own followings. But everyone knew the show needed Fox to continue long-term. Eventually, a deal was reached. Fox returned for the 4th season with one of the highest salaries on television at that time. The exact terms were never publicly disclosed, but Fox had won his point about being valued properly. The experience left some bitterness between Fox and the producers, and it would contribute to his decision to leave the show entirely at the end of the 6th season. During his absence, those 6 episodes gave the supporting cast chances to shine, and they made the most of it, proving that Sanford and Son had built something bigger than any one performer. Fact 4. The show premiered as a mid-season replacement. Sanford and Son didn't launch in the fall like most new series. NBC introduced it as a mid-season replacement on January 14, 1972, taking over the Friday night time slot at 8 p.m. from a show called The DA. Network executives weren't entirely sure how it would perform. This was 1972, and television was still a relatively conservative medium. A sitcom featuring an all-black cast in prime time was considered risky by network standards, even though America was 5 years past the civil rights movement's major legislative victories. The show had to prove itself quickly in an era when series could be canceled after just a few episodes if ratings didn't materialize. But Sanford and Son didn't just survive, it exploded. Within weeks, the show was generating buzz across the country. Newspapers began touting Red Fox as NBC's answer to Archie Bunker from All in the Family, which was dominating the CBS lineup. Both characters were bigoted, cantankerous, and somehow lovable despite their flaws. Both shows were Norman Lear productions, adapted from British sitcoms. The formula worked brilliantly. By the end of its first season, Sanford and Son had climbed to 6th place in the Nielsen ratings. It stayed in the top 10 for virtually every week it aired during its 6-year run. For 3 of those years, it ranked in the top 5 most watched shows in America. During its 2nd season, the show reached number 2 in the overall ratings, an incredible achievement for any series, let alone one that had premiered mid-season. That Friday night at 8 p.m. time slot became appointment television for millions of families, both black and white. The show held that same time slot for its entire network run, something very few series can claim. People knew exactly when to tune in, and they did, week after week, year after year.
Maybe we shouldn't have let them in the UN.
Fact 3. Red Fox paid for the Ink Spot's music himself. Fred Sanford loved to sing, and Fox often broke into song during episodes, performing tunes by the Ink Spots, a vocal group from the 1930s and 1940s. These weren't improvisations or accidents. Fox was genuinely a huge fan of the Ink Spots and their smooth, harmonious style. He wanted to feature their music prominently on the show because it reflected Fred Sanford's era and taste. The Ink Spots represented a generation of black entertainers who had achieved mainstream success, and Fox wanted to honor that legacy. When the show's producers looked into licensing the songs, they discovered the music rights were extremely expensive. The Ink Spots catalog was tightly controlled, and the fees for using their recordings on a television show were substantial. NBC, despite the show's high ratings and profitability, refused to pay for the rights. They told Fox he could sing other songs or they could skip the musical moments entirely. Fox made a decision that surprised even the producers. He decided to pay the licensing fees out of his own pocket. He loved the music enough to cover the considerable costs himself, ensuring that Fred Sanford could sing the Ink Spots whenever the script called for it. This wasn't the only time Fox used his own money to enhance the show or help others. According to producer Bud Yorkin, Fox was extraordinarily generous with his earnings, sometimes to his own detriment. He helped friends, loaned money to fellow performers, and supported causes in the black community. He bought property, invested in businesses, and lived well. But he was also frequently in debt, despite his substantial television salary. When he ran short on cash, Fox would sometimes use creative negotiating tactics with the producers. He would claim he was sick and that his doctor had told him he wasn't eating properly or couldn't continue working. He would tell them he needed more money for medical expenses or to maintain his health. The producers knew what was really happening, but they also knew they needed Fox. The show couldn't exist without him, so they would renegotiate, advance him money, or find other ways to help him manage his finances. Fox's financial troubles would continue throughout his life. In the 1980s, after several failed television projects and business ventures, the IRS seized his assets for unpaid taxes. He owed millions in back taxes, penalties, and interest. When Fox died suddenly in 1991 while rehearsing for a new sitcom called The Royal Family, he died broke. Eddie Murphy, one of the many comedians Fox had influenced and helped, paid for Fox's funeral, giving him the lavish, star-studded send-off he deserved. It was a final act of generosity for a man who had been generous to so many others, even when he couldn't afford it himself.
Won't he die?
I don't think so.
Chinese food good for you.
Fact 2. Demond Wilson beat out Richard Pryor for the role. The role of Lamont Sanford attracted serious attention from Hollywood's comedy talent. Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin considered several actors, including comedian Johnny Brown, who would have been perfect for the part. Brown had the comedic chops and the timing, but he had already committed to Rowan and Martin's laugh-in and couldn't take the role. He later became famous as Nathan Bookman, the building superintendent on Good Times, which was also produced by Norman Lear. Richard Pryor, who was already building his reputation as a groundbreaking stand-up comedian, wanted the part of Lamont. Pryor saw the potential in working with Red Fox and being part of what would clearly be a major television project. But Demond Wilson had a crucial insight about the show's dynamics that Pryor apparently didn't consider. When Wilson met with the producers, he told them directly and bluntly, "You can't put a comedian with a comedian, you've got to have a straight man." Wilson understood instinctively that Fox needed someone who could react to his antics and ground the comedy, not compete with him for laughs. Wilson had earned his chance through a memorable 1971 guest appearance on All in the Family. In that episode, titled Edith Writes a Song, Wilson and Cleavon Little played burglars who held the Bunker family hostage in their own home. The episode dealt with race, poverty, and police brutality through the conversation between the robbers and their hostages. Wilson's performance caught Norman Lear's attention. When Lear needed someone to play Lamont, he remembered the young actor who had held his own against Carroll O'Connor's Archie Bunker. Wilson was only in his mid-20s when he landed the role, a theater veteran, but a newcomer to television. He had grown up in Harlem after being born in Valdosta, Georgia. He had served in Vietnam, where he was wounded in combat with the 4th Infantry Division. After returning to New York, he studied acting and performed on stage before heading to Hollywood. Wilson brought a natural earnestness to Lamont that made him the perfect counterbalance to Fred's scheming. His chemistry with Fox proved his instincts about the role were absolutely correct. Together, they created television magic.
How you want your egg?
Fact 1. The show opened doors for future sitcoms. Sanford and Son arrived at a pivotal moment in television history. It was the first series with a predominantly black cast to achieve massive mainstream success since Amos and Andy had been canceled nearly 20 years earlier in the mid-1950s. The cancellation of Amos and Andy had left a void in television representation. For almost 2 decades, black families rarely saw themselves reflected in primetime sitcoms, except as supporting characters or occasional guest stars. The show proved to network executives across the industry that audiences of all backgrounds would tune in to watch authentic stories about black families. This wasn't a niche show playing to a narrow demographic. Sanford and Son competed with and often beat the biggest shows on television, pulling in viewers from every race, age group, and region of the country. The Nielsen ratings made it impossible for executives to ignore the demand for diverse programming. Within just a few years of Sanford and Son's enormous success, a wave of other groundbreaking shows followed. Good Times premiered in 1974, focusing on the Evans family in the Chicago projects. The Jeffersons launched in 1975, showing a black family that had achieved financial success. What's Happening arrived in 1976 with stories about teenagers in Los Angeles. Later came Different Strokes, The Cosby Show, and countless others. Each of these shows owed a debt to Sanford and Son for proving the audience existed. These shows created opportunities for black actors, writers, directors, and technical crew members in an industry that had largely shut them out. Fox used his influence and his platform generously. He understood he had power, and he used it to help his friends from the comedy circuit. He got roles for performers like Slappy White, Don Bexley, LaWanda Page, and Whitman Mayo, all of whom had struggled to break into television. He helped launch Pat Morita's career, and Morita would later become famous as Arnold on Happy Days and as Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid films. Fox believed in giving people chances. The show's 6-season run ended in March 1977 when Fox left for a variety show on ABC called The Red Fox Comedy Hour. ABC had made him an offer that NBC wouldn't match, partly hoping to weaken NBC's Friday night lineup. The variety show lasted only 4 months before cancellation, but Sanford and Son's legacy continued. NBC tried to keep the franchise alive with Sanford Arms in 1977, featuring supporting cast members like Whitman Mayo and LaWanda Page, but without Fox and Wilson, it lasted only 4 episodes. Fox returned to NBC in 1980 for a show called Sanford, playing Fred again, but Wilson declined to return as Lamont. That show lasted 2 seasons before ending in 1981. But the original Sanford and Son lived on through syndication, playing in reruns for decades and introducing new generations to Fred's fake heart attacks and Lamont's exasperated responses. The show influenced countless comedians who came after, from Eddie Murphy to Martin Lawrence to Jamie Foxx, who took his stage name partly in honor of Red. The Junkyard may have been fictional, but the impact on television comedy was absolutely real and lasting. From childhood friendships that lasted a lifetime to a TV theme written faster than most people can decide what to order for lunch, Sanford and Son gave us more than just laughs. It gave us a window into a family that argued, schemed, and loved each other through it all. The Junkyard at 9114 South Central Avenue might have been fiction, but the impact was real. If you enjoyed learning these hidden facts about one of television's greatest comedies, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the shows that shaped television history.